The courtroom feels unusually cold today, while the sun outside is blazing. Kody sits in the front, his posture upright, hands clasped tightly to the point where his knuckles whiten. Every glance he gives to his wives was an amalgamation of worry, guilt, and a desperate hope that no explosive secrets would surface. Around him, the courtroom hummed with quiet murmurs, the soft shuffle of papers, and the rare cough from back rows. But beneath this seemingly mundane scene, the tension was electric, almost tangible, like a wire about to snap. Robyn fidgets in her seat, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the edge of the table. She takes a shaky breath, her lips pressed tightly together, in a silent attempt to restrain the storm inside. Christine, on the other hand, sits straight up and still, her eyes narrowed, scanning the room as if she dares someone to try something. There's a quiet fire in her gaze, a mix of suspicion and defiance that has defined her throughout these years. Janelle sits with a slight hunch, trying to seem composed, though the twitch of her hands gives away the anxiety she desperately tries to conceal. Then there's Meri, whose face is impassive, but her eyes glint with something more. Maybe a mixture of fear and determination, perhaps regret. The judge enters the room, and in an instant, the murmur dies down. There's a commanding presence about him, the kind that stops even the most confident people short. He lowers himself into his chair, takes hold of the gavel, and the room shrinks along with him as the moment weighs down. "This courtroom is now in session," he says, his tone calm but piercing, carrying an authority silencing every whispered conversation. "We are here to uncover the truth. I expect honesty, and I expect clarity. Anything less will not be tolerated." A collective intake of breath sweeps across the room. The tension is thick enough to slice with a knife. Kody shifts, a low creak of his chair echoing in the hushed room. He knows what is at stake. Years of trust, loyalty, and bonds of family hang precariously on the edge of a knife. And in the pit of his stomach, he knows that some of those truths have already begun to unravel. The first witness is called. A former family friend who knows more than anyone outside the immediate family. Her mere presence seems to raise the tension. She approaches the stand, her steps slow, heels clicking against the glossy floor of the courtroom. The soft sound reverberates with each click, echoing through the silence, a rhythmic warning that something important is to come. The lawyer approaches her delicately at first. "Can you tell the court what you witnessed over the years within this family?" The woman swallows hard, looking briefly at Kody and then at each of the wives, her eyes flickering with hesitation and uncertainty. She takes a deep breath. "I've always tried to stay out of their personal affairs," she begins, voice low but steady. "But there are things I've seen, things that can't be ignored any longer." Her testimony begins slowly, recounting small incidents that seemed inconsequential at the time: an overheard conversation, a hidden phone call, a late-night argument. But each detail is a thread pulling at the larger tapestry of deception. As she speaks, the wives exchange furtive glances. Christine's eyes flash with recognition, her jaw tightening. Robyn's lips quiver, barely able to hold back a gasp. Janelle clenches her fists beneath the table, trying to appear neutral, while Meri's calm facade cracks for just a moment, her fingers curling into her palms. The lawyer presses on for details. "Can you describe, for the record, the night of the argument last November? Who was present?" The woman nods slowly. "Yes, Kody and Christine were in the living room, voices raised. Then Robyn entered, and I overheard. Her words falter, and the courtroom instinctively leans forward. Even the air seems heavier, as if each listener strains to catch each syllable. Kody swallows hard, and a few beads of sweat form at his temple. He shifts in his seat, trying to hold on to composure, the subtle quiver of his fingers giving him away. He had hoped some things would remain hidden, but it's clear now that the walls are closing in. Christine leans forward, her sharp eyes fixed on the witness. "And what exactly did you hear?" she asks, her tone measured, but edged with tension. The witness hesitated and glanced over at Kody before continuing. I heard words that suggested there was more going on behind closed doors than anyone realized. Secrets that could hurt more than just feelings, but relationships, trust, everything. A low murmur sweeps through the audience. The gravity of her statement hangs like a storm cloud over the room. Robyn presses a hand to her chest, drawing in a shaky breath, while Janelle's hands shake slightly as she twists at her ring. Meri shifts in her seat, her eyes narrowing while trying to interpret every nuance. He puts the next piece of evidence on the table, a small envelope thick with papers. "We also have documentation to support these claims." The envelope is passed to the judge, who looks at it briefly before setting it aside, but the effect is immediate. The courtroom tightens, the suspense ratcheting higher with every heartbeat. The witness speaks, her voice growing louder. She recounts incidents showing the first fissures forming between the wives, the silent tension with Kody, and the hidden doubts that have festered for years. "It's not just one person," she says, eyes scanning the wives in turn. "It's the whole dynamic, the way trust has been broken, slowly, quietly, over time. Each wife reacts differently." Christine leans back, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing with controlled fury. Robyn's shoulders slump slightly, her expression a mix of hurt and fear. Janelle's lips press into a thin line, and Meri, always collected, emits the faintest sigh, barely audible yet weighted in its implications. Kody's hands tighten around the edge of the table as he fights to remain composed, acknowledging with each revelation that they are standing at the edge of an inevitable family meltdown. The attorney raises his hand, and the courtroom immediately goes silent, a silence that speaks volumes. A heavy, oppressive silence falls over all persons present. Every individual in the courtroom feels the weight of what was just said. Kody looks at his wives for some sign of unity or reassurance. Instead, he sees shock, betrayal, and uncertainty etched on their faces. With a shrill creak, the doors to the courtroom open. The sudden move startles everyone. The court officer steps in, holding in his hands an enormous folder full of documents. "Your Honor, additional evidence has just arrived," he says. "Lay it on the table," says the judge, raising an eyebrow. Whispers ripple through the room as the contents are revealed. A series of letters, messages, and recordings that nobody expected is now presented. Christine's eyes widen. Robyn gasps softly, covering her mouth. Janelle's grip on the edge of her chair tightens. Meri leans forward slightly, a flicker of concern crossing her face. Kody exhales sharply, and tension visibly rises in his shoulders. Every eye in the courtroom now rests on this new evidence, anticipation and dread swirling in equal measure. The judge clears his throat, signaling for calm. "We will review this evidence carefully, but I expect full cooperation from everyone. The truth must come out, and it will affect all parties involved." The weight of his words descends upon the room like a dark cloud, the realization that nothing will remain hidden anymore presses down upon each family member. As Section 1 draws to its close, the camera, or the narrative perspective, holds on Kody's face. His eyes show fear, doubt, and a hint of desperation. Robyn's hands shake slightly as she clings to her purse. Christine's face sets hard, a shield of defiance. Janelle tries to compose herself, while Meri acts calm, though her eyes betray the storm brewing inside. The room waits, suspended in tense silence. Every heartbeat sounds louder than the one before it. A first wave of revelations has passed, but the storm is just beginning. What secrets come next? Which relationships will make it through the scrutiny? And who will finally break under the weight of decades of buried truths? The tension in the courtroom is palpable, almost suffocating, as the second witness is called. Robyn sits upright now, her hands trembling slightly as she smooths the folds of her dress. Her heart pounds with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She knows that what comes next could change everything. Christine, sitting beside her, leans forward, eyes narrowed, as if preparing for a fight. Janelle fidgets subtly, her fingers tracing patterns on the table, while Meri watches silently, expression unreadable, calculating. Even Kody, usually the composed center of this family storm, shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. The witness, a good neighbor to the family, took the stand. Nervously, she looked first at the judge, then right at Kody. The air in the room tightened further, as if the whole courtroom was holding its collective breath. She began hesitantly, her words recounting moments that, on surface levels, seemed minor, but clearly were hinting at much deeper fractures within the family. I wasn't supposed to notice. She starts off, her voice low and wavering, but I overheard things, arguments, whispers, conversations that no one was meant to hear. Things that suggest not everything is as perfect as it seems. Christine leans forward, her voice quiet and cutting. What exactly did you hear? In the kitchen, loud and wavering, Robyn was talking to Kody about something secret. Then Christine entered the room, and the tension, it was almost like a war zone. Words were said, words that implied betrayal, secrecy, and fear. Robyn's hands clench in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. Her chest rises and falls in shallow, anxious breaths. Janelle bites her lip to stifle a whimper, while Meri leans back slightly, carefully masking her reaction. Kody's jaw tightens as he struggles to maintain composure, aware that every revelation chips away at the carefully constructed facade he's tried to maintain. The lawyer leans forward, gently but firmly. Can you tell us what else you observed? Any interactions that seemed unusual or out of the ordinary? The witness falters, the moment before gaining courage. There was a night when I saw Kody leave the room in a rush. He was agitated, almost frantic. Robyn followed him, pleading quietly, almost begging. I did not hear everything, but the fear on her face, unlike anything I'd seen before. Christine was in the doorway, her eyes ablaze, muttering something I couldn't catch. The tension was unbearable. The courtroom is silent as a tomb, each ear straining for every word. Robyn shoots a glance down at her shaking hands, while Christine's eyes flash with indignation. Janelle swallows hard as Meri's eyes flicker to Kody in search of any hint of explanation. Kody exhales slowly as his shoulders slump slightly under the weight of all the secrets, suddenly taking on physical shape. The lawyer nods, placing a folder on the stand. We also have testimony to corroborate these events, he says. The judge peers over his glasses, his expression unreadable. Photos, messages, and journal entries are passed to the judge, his eyes skimming each page with deliberate slowness. The air thickens with each passing second, as if the very courtroom senses the storm to come. Robyn swallows, biting her lip as tears threaten to fall. Christine's body tightens, her every muscle coiled and poised to attack at the first trace of insult or accusation. Janelle twists her hands nervously in her lap, while Meri's calm, calculating gaze pierces through the tension in the air, trying to pinpoint what motives flow beneath the surface. Kody freezes, chest tight, silently willing this revelation to stop before it destroys the fragile bonds holding his family together. The witness continues, her voice trembling but growing in strength as she realizes the gravity of her testimony. I also saw interactions that suggested someone was manipulating emotions, creating doubt, stirring conflict. It wasn't just arguments. It was subtle, constant, whispers that planted seeds of mistrust. Christine bends forward, voice at a low tone but sharp. Are you suggesting someone intentionally caused conflict between us? The witness nods slightly. I don't know who, but it was done on purpose. And how people reacted to this, fear, anger, sadness, the emotional impact after that is crystal clear. The lawyer shifts, turning toward the judge. Your Honor, we also have a recording taken without knowledge that captures some of these conversations. It's short, but it clearly demonstrates the emotional turmoil and conflict within the household. The room falls silent. Robyn's breathing speeds up. Christine's eyes narrow even further. Janelle clutches her fists, and Meri's lips thin, her jaw firming. Kody pales a bit, the weight of imminent exposure already falling heavy on him. Every person in the room knows that the dam of secrecy is about to break. The recording begins low, almost imperceptible. And then the voices grow clear. Arguments and whispered pleas and emotional outbursts tangle above one another. Robyn's shaking voice and Christine's words, sharp and biting. Kody's defensive tones. The sound is intimate, personal, devastating. Each second seems to stretch, amplifying the emotional intensity in the room. The wives flinch at certain parts, and shock, guilt, and pain flicker in their faces. Christine bites her lip as her voice echoes from the recording. Tears well up in Robyn's eyes as Janelle swallows hard, shaking her head. Meri's gaze is steadfast, unwavering, but the tension in her shoulders speaks volumes of the turmoil within. Kody's hands shake on the edge of the table. He says nothing, but the storm in his eyes is evident to see. The witness takes a deep breath, obviously preparing herself for the coup de grace. There's one more thing, she says, her voice shaking. I saw a note, a hidden letter. It wasn't meant for anyone's eyes but Kody's, but I saw it, and it suggested that not everything he said to you has been true. The letter implied that someone has been keeping secrets that could destroy trust completely. A communal gulp of air fills the courtroom. Robyn's hand flies to her mouth, stifling a sob. Christine leans forward, her fingers wrapped around the edge of the table in a white-knuckle grip. Janelle's eyes go wide, and Meri shifts slightly, a flicker of something almost like fear crossing her face. Kody just sits frozen, staring straight ahead, fighting to process the gravity of what's just been revealed. The judge adjusts his glasses and speaks in his calm, authoritative tone. We will scrutinize this new evidence carefully. Everybody present here needs to be telling the truth, as further revelations will strike deep into each party's interest. The air is thick, filled with one of those taut tensions that makes every heartbeat louder than the previous one. The secrets of this family begin to spill out into the open, and no one can predict who will emerge unscathed after the fallout. In a flash, A court officer intervenes with yet another paper, more explosive than what has just been produced. The courtroom leans forward in unison, holding its collective breath. As the paper is laid on the judge's desk, everyone knows instinctively that this is big. Tears well up in Robyn's eyes, and her hands quiver, clenching together. Christine's jaw clenches, an expression half anticipation, half dread. Janelle's hold on her bag goes white-knuckle. Meri's serene face hides a maelstrom brewing inside. Kody exhales strongly, knowing full well it is far from over. The courtroom holds its collective breath as Meri rises slowly, her heels clicking against the shiny floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat in tense silence. She walks toward the witness stand, composed but with a subtle tremor in her fingers, betraying the storm of emotions she's carefully kept inside for so long. Every pair of eyes follows her movement. Kody's gaze is fixed, a mixture of fear and desperation in them. Christine's sharp, calculating stare burns like fire. Robyn shifts uneasily. Janelle twists her hands in her lap, and the judge watches in silence, ready at any moment to command attention at the first sign of chaos. Meri settles onto the stand, clasping her hands together in front of her. She takes a deep breath, her chest rising slowly, and begins. "I've remained quiet for a long time," she says, her voice steady, but carrying an undercurrent of raw emotion. "But I can no longer stay silent about what I've witnessed, what I've known." A murmur sweeps over the courtroom. Robyn looks sideways, her teeth nipping at her lip. Christine leans forward, her eyes narrowing. Kody's hands, resting on the table, quiver slightly as he listens, his shoulder tension palpable. Janelle's fingers twist together in a nervous fashion, and while Meri wears an outward mask of calm, her mind is racing. The air is thick with anticipation. "I overheard a conversation months ago," Meri says, her voice catching, between Kody and Robyn. They were talking about something private, something that, if it came out, would change everything about how this family works. I didn't want to believe it at first, that it must have been some kind of mistake. But then I realized, the truth is undeniable. Christine's eyes widen, and she leans forward. "What did you hear?" she asks, her voice sharp and edged with suspicion. Meri stops, composing herself. "They were talking about decisions made without the rest of the wives knowing. Decisions that affected all of us. Financially, emotionally, and personally." Kody was defensive, almost pleading, while Robyn, she seemed conflicted, scared. "I never wanted to witness it, but it's real, and it matters." The courtroom seems to hold its collective breath. Every soul present in that courtroom knows the weight of this testimony. Robyn looks down, a flush spreading across her face, while Christine's hands clench tightly around the edge of the table. Janelle makes slight fidgets, while Kody's jaw tightens, fighting composure. Even the judge leans slightly forward, feeling the tension, realizing the next words could redefine the course of the hearing. Meri goes on to recall another incident she witnessed, a heated discussion one night between Christine and Kody. The words spoken were sharp, cutthroat, and angry, full of betrayal. Christine demanded answers, Meri says, and Kody hesitated. His silence said more than words ever could. The tension between them, it was suffocating, almost palpable. And I knew, at that moment, that no one in this room was completely honest. Robyn's hand flies to her mouth, and she swallows hard. Christine's eyes narrow, lips pressed tightly together, as if steeling herself for the confrontation. Janelle shifts uncomfortably, while Meri's face remains calm, though her eyes betray a storm raging within. Kody tightens his fingers around the table's edge, with a slight shake in his hands the only tell of his nerves. The lawyer leans forward. Meri, can you tell the court what this means for the family dynamic? How has it affected relationships among the wives? Meri's voice softens, carrying a quiet sadness. It's caused distance, misunderstandings, and fear. Each wife has her own version of the truth, and none of them know the full story. Secrecy and the hidden conversations, they've created a fragile tension that could snap at any moment. And I fear that once everything comes to light, some relationships may never recover. Suddenly, the lawyer slides a small envelope across the table toward Meri. She hesitates, eyes flicking toward Kody, then slowly opens it. Inside is a note handwritten, carefully hidden, detailing private conversations and decisions. The contents are damning, revealing the emotional manipulation, hidden agendas, and betrayals that have simmered beneath the surface for years. The courtroom is silent. The weight of the evidence presses down on everyone. Robyn pales, her hands clutching her purse. Christine leans back a little, shock etched into every line of her face. Janelle's lips press into a thin line, while Meri's expression hardens as she reads aloud, her words echoing through the room. Decisions made without transparency, promises broken, loyalties tested. Kody swallows hard, his fingers curling into fists. The realization weighs heavily that his secrets are no longer safe. Every eye in the room is fixed on the unfolding drama. The tension between the wives is almost unbearable, an unspoken battle of emotions, suspicion, and hidden anger. The lawyer presses Meri, asking her to explain while being gentle. You don't consider these actions to be intentional, but more like mistakes? Meri looks at Kody, eyes narrowed, her voice steady. Intentional. It's a pattern. Decisions made to control, to manipulate, to protect some at the expense of others. And the repercussions, the emotional fallout, it's devastating. Robyn finally speaks up, her voice trembling but firm. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought it was just little decisions. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Her words hang in the air, fragile but loaded with guilt. Christine's eyes flash with anger as Janelle bites her lip to hold herself back from speaking. Meri keeps her face controlled, but a very slight shake in her hands exposes the emotional weight behind her composed exterior. Kody leans forward, his voice low and urgent. Everyone just needs to calm down. We're here to understand, not to attack. The truth is painful, yes, but it's necessary. The judge raises a hand, and the room falls silent. This testimony is crucial, but the court is not finished. There are more questions to be answered, and further evidence to weigh. Everyone must stay on their honor, because what you will face in the revelations to come will test this family in ways you can't fathom. Attention ratchets higher as the next piece of evidence is brought into view, a video recording of a private conversation between Kody and one of the wives. The room leans in collectively, the faint click of the play button echoing like a gunshot. Voices overlap, arguments spill into the open, emotions raw and exposed. Robyn gasps softly, Christine flinches, Janelle covers her mouth, and Meri's eyes narrow as, with calculating intensity, she scrutinizes every movement, every expression, searching for hidden truths. Kody's hands shake, his knuckles white, as the room watches in the emotional unraveling of it all. The video plays out scenes of hushed conversations, tense arguments, and moments of silent despair. Manipulation, miscommunication, and hidden agendas have been the invisible dynamics at work behind the walls of this family for years. Every detail, every word, is that thread tugging on the fragile bonds that have held them together. Meri speaks in a calm, steady tone, resolute. This proves what I've been saying. The secrets, the hidden words, the silent manipulations, it all matters. And it's not just small things. These are the building blocks of distrust. And once exposed, they have the power to dismantle everything. The courtroom is dead silent, the emotional weight almost suffocating. Kody looks at his wives, wide-eyed, as he realizes that the family he's tried to protect is unraveling in front of him. Robyn quietly sobs into her hands. Christine's expression hardens. Janelle shakes her head, and Meri's gaze pierces through the tension created, unwavering. The courtroom feels smaller now, every corner heavy with tension. Afternoon sun streams through the tall windows, casting sharp beams across polished floors, catching dust in the air like tiny, floating reminders of the chaos about to erupt. Robyn is perched on the edge of her seat, hands pressed tightly in her lap. Her face pale and drawn. The memory of the evidence presented earlier weighs heavily on her, and every glance toward Kody is charged with a mix of hope and fear. Christine leans back slightly, jaw tight, eyes hard as flint, her mind racing through every possible angle of confrontation. Janelle shifts subtly, her ring twisting nervously, and Meri presents a calm exterior, though her eyes betray the calculation behind the serene mask. Kody sits rigidly in the middle of this storm, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. The earlier revelations have shaken him visibly, and though he tries to project composure, the subtle tension in his shoulders betrays the inner turmoil. Every breath he takes seems almost measured, as though one misstep could ignite a confrontation that has been simmering for years. The judge's gavel strikes once, loud and commanding, bringing silence over the room. "We shall proceed with the next testimony," he states, voice calm but firm. "This will outline direct interactions between family members and the decisions which have affected each of you both emotionally and financially. Honesty is key." The next witness, a longtime family friend, steps forward. His demeanor is anxious yet determined. The courtroom leans in instinctively, sensing that this testimony will peel back another layer of secrets, exposing vulnerabilities long hidden. "I've known this family for years," the witness begins, voice quiet yet steady. "And I've observed patterns that, in my view, explain some of the dynamics in the relationships here. Patterns of secrecy, manipulation, and emotional strain." Robyn flinches at the word manipulation, her eyes flicking toward Kody. Christine's fists clenched slightly, a subtle indication of the anger welling up inside. Janelle purses her lips, while Meri's eyes narrow, calculating the weight of these words. Kody's jaw clenches. The tension is almost unbearable. The witness then described incidents of private conversations and concealed decisions leading to emotional fissures among the wives. There were moments when one wife would make a decision without telling the other wives, which caused feelings of betrayal or doubt. They would argue over what would appear to be minor issues, but layered beneath were their fears, mistrust, and secrecy. Christine leans forward, her voice low but incisive. "And you believe these actions were intentional?" The witness nods slightly. "Yes, the pattern is clear. Decisions were made deliberately, sometimes to protect certain interests, sometimes to manipulate outcomes emotionally. And the consequences, tension, mistrust, heartbreak, have been profound." Robyn's hands clench tightly in her lap, nails digging into her palms. A tear slides down her cheek, and she quickly wipes it away. A bit embarrassed, but unable to hold back the emotion. Janelle shifts uncomfortably, nor is Meri's calm exterior ruffled emotionally by these revelations. Kody sits frozen, his chest tight and struggling for control, knowing each word brings the family one step closer to confrontation. The attorney steps forward and begins to address the court. Your Honor, we also have messages, notes, and recordings that show this pattern. They show the subtle ways emotions were manipulated, how trust was broken, and the ripple effect it created within the family. The courtroom falls silent as the evidence is passed to the judge. Every person in the courtroom seems to feel the revelations bearing down, like a weight upon them. Robyn's eyes are wide. Christine's jaw is clenched. Janelle's lips are in a thin line. And Meri's eyes, cool but keen, notice every detail. Kody's fists clench, his knuckles white, as he breathes shallowly. The lawyer presses on with pointed questions. Can you describe the emotional impact these actions had on the wives individually? The witness hesitates a moment, swallowing hard. Robyn was visibly anxious, almost fearful, during many of these interactions. Christine often responded with anger and frustration. Janelle appeared conflicted and unsure, while Meri maintained calmness. But her eyes betrayed a storm brewing beneath the surface. Kody, as the central figure, often seemed unaware of the depth of the emotional consequences, though I believe he was aware on some level. The room absorbs the weight of this testimony. Every heart beats a little faster. Every breath seems to be louder than it really is. Thick tension can almost be cut with a knife. Kody glances at his wives, hoping for reassurance, for understanding, but the expressions he meets tell a story of fear, betrayal, and simmering resentment. A small envelope is laid on the stand by a court officer suddenly. The judge looks at it, his face impassive. This will be reviewed as part of the ongoing proceedings. The courtroom leans collectively forward, as anticipation ripples through every person present. Robyn's hands shake as she clasps them together. Christine's eyes narrow, every muscle in her body rigid. Janelle shifts uncomfortably, and Meri's calm mask hides the rapid calculation of potential outcomes. Kody lets out an abrupt breath, tension coiling like a spring ready to snap. The lawyer opens the envelope, revealing letters, reportings, and notes documenting private conversations between the family members. Tender and cruel, sometimes laced with deceit. With each piece of evidence, another layer peels away to reveal a web of secrecy and emotional manipulations. The courtroom collectively leans forward, unable to look away. Robyn gasps softly, eyes wide. Christine's lips press tightly together, her expression hardened. Janelle's hands are trembling slightly, and Meri's eyes glint, focused and sharp. Kody's fingers dig into the edge of the table as he fights to keep himself together, realizing that everything he had ever believed in was disintegrating before his eyes. The judge raises his gavel for silence, and his eyes scan the courtroom. This evidence tends to speak to the enormity of the situation, but it is not all there is to the story. Each of you must tell the truth about what you have done, what you decided, and what motivated you. It is then, and only then, that the court will be able to ascertain the truth. The wives exchange tense glances. Robyn's eyes well with tears. Christine stares unyielding. Janelle bites her lip to stop herself from speaking, and Meri remains poised, though a flicker of apprehension crosses her features. Kody leans forward, trying to appear composed, but the strain shows in the tightening of his shoulders and slight tremor of his hands. The courtroom door creaks open, and another witness is called, a confidant who has seen emotional fractures firsthand. They speak softly but with conviction, detailing private moments of tension, arguments, and whispered accusations. This family has lived with secrets for years, the witness says. But now, with these revelations, the impact is unavoidable. Emotions are raw, and the consequences of hidden truths are about to surface fully. Christine is leaning forward, her voice barely audible. And who is responsible for this? The witness pauses, then continues. It's not one person, a combination of decisions, secrecy, and miscommunication. But some choices were intentional, and those will have the greatest consequences. Robyn's fists begin to clench, while the beginnings of tears appear in her eyes. Janelle starts shifting uncomfortably as she works to keep herself together. Meri focuses her hard gaze right at Kody, demanding an explanation, while Kody doesn't move, mesmerized that the web of deception he had been weaving the last several years was crumbling before him. He then introduces the most damaging evidence, an audio recording of Kody's late-night discussion with one wife about decisions that greatly affected the others. The room goes silent, with the voices that play through it tense, emotional, and revealing. Robyn gasps, Christine flinches, Janelle covers her mouth, and Meri watches with intensity, her eyes analyzing every word spoken. Kody's hands shake, his demeanor faltering under the weight of the truth. The recording stops. The quiet in the courtroom is deafening. The emotional impact is instant. Robyn sobs quietly. Christine's eyes flash with anger. Janelle's hands are shaking, and Meri's face does not twitch. But the tension emanating from her is palpable. Kody sits rigidly, his jaw clenched, understanding that the family he has struggled to keep safe may never survive after this exposure. The judge leaned forward, his voice deliberate and heavy with weight. It is clear that the dynamics of the family are strained beyond what was previously understood. The court shall continue investigating, and each party shall provide clarity. The revelations thus far indicate that the truth is far more complicated, and, for that matter, emotional, than anyone anticipated. The courtroom is tense, almost unbearably so, as the final witness of the day is called. All eyes in the room center on the front where Kody sits with a mixture of fear, guilt, and mounting dread. Robyn's hands quiver just slightly in her lap, her eyes glassy, her breathing shallow. Christine leans forward, her sharp gaze locked onto Kody, every line of her face taut with anticipation and restrained anger. Janelle rocks slightly in her chair, twisting her hands nervously, as Meri, ever composed, watches the proceedings with icy precision, her eyes reflecting a quiet intensity that makes everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. The witness, someone who has been intimately involved with the inner circle of the family, steps up. Their presence alone feels like a storm about to hit, with the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air. I've watched this family for years. They begin, their voice calmly heavy with emotion. I've watched the little cracks grow into fractures, the little lies grow into big betrayals. Now, it's all coming to light. Robyn swallowed hard, her teeth sinking into her lip, while Christine's eyes managed to narrow into sharp slits. Janelle's fingers twisted nervously, and Meri's calm masked the rapid calculation of what was about to unfold. Kody shifted slightly in his seat, a bead of sweat forming on his temple as he anticipated the inevitable confrontation. The witness continued, recounting private interactions that had been kept from the public view between the family members. There have been moments of anger, of manipulation, and of betrayal. Decisions were made behind closed doors that directly affected each wife, emotionally, financially, and personally. Some of these decisions were calculated, others, well, they were careless, and the consequences have been devastating. Christine leans forward, her voice low but cutting. Can you be specific? Who made these decisions? The witness takes a deep breath. Some were made by Kody. Others involved secret alliances among the wives themselves. But the common thread is secrecy, and the emotional toll has been immense. Robyn, for instance, has often been caught in the middle, struggling to protect herself and others, while Christine's anger has flared in response to perceived betrayals. Janelle has tried to remain neutral, but even she has been affected by the hidden manipulations. And Meri has remained composed, but she has also taken calculated steps to protect herself. Robyn's hand flies to her mouth, a small sob escaping. Christine's jaw tightens, eyes flashing with rage. Janelle's hands are shaking, while Meri's eyes dot to every face for reaction. Kody sits rigidly, fingers curling into fists, knuckles white, breathing shallow and measured, as he braces for the impact. The lawyer leans forward, voice steady but deliberate. Your Honor. We also have a series of messages and recordings that corroborate these claims. They demonstrate the deliberate emotional manipulation and secrecy that have pervaded this family for years. The judge raises an eyebrow, voice calm but firm. We will review this evidence with great care. Everyone present must answer honestly, for the consequences of dishonesty are severe. The envelope containing the messages and recordings is opened and passed to the judge. As the content is reviewed, tension mounts exponentially in the room. Robyn's eyes widen as she recognizes certain exchanges. Christine is leaning forward, her fists clenched, her lips pressed tightly together. Janelle covers her mouth with her hand to hold back a reaction, while Meri's eyes flicker with subtle alarm. Kody tenses his shoulders, and a tiny tremor runs through his hands. The witness points to specific messages and recordings of conversations where secrets were kept, feelings manipulated, and trust shattered. These interactions, says the witness, illustrate that the fabric of this family has been stretched for years. Every decision, every kept conversation, has contributed to the tension, mistrust, and emotional distance that exists today. Robyn's breathing speeds up as a tear is wiped from her cheek. Christine's eyes are blazing, a mix of rage and heartbreak. Janelle twists her hands tightly together, while Meri's gaze sharpens, calculating and precise. Kody leans forward slightly, his jaw tight, realizing nothing can undo the effects of these revelations. Then, the attorney proceeds to introduce as evidence a recently found handwritten note, one which outlines secret decisions made by Kody that pertain to all the wives. The courtroom is leaning forward, anticipation thick in the air. The note uncovers choices made in secret, choices that led to unintended circumstances and moments when trust was compromised. Robyn gasps softly, eyes wide. Christine flinches, jaw tight. Janelle shakes slightly, and Meri studies every word carefully, weighing motives. Kody's hands shake, clinging to the table edge as the reality of exposure becomes undeniable. The note is read aloud, each word a dagger cutting through fragile tension. Promises broken, alliances formed in secrecy, decisions made without transparency. It is a weight of emotions that the courtroom holds onto with each word uttered. Robyn cries quietly. Christine's fists tighten. Janelle's lips tremble, and a gleam of comprehension and calculation lights up in Meri's eyes. Kody is pale-faced, jaws clenched, as the evidence he has tried to build his image on gets torn down. The judge leans forward, his voice heavy with authority. This evidence confirms what has been suspected: emotional manipulation, secrecy, and making decisions without transparency have inflicted severe damage. The court shall continue to examine the repercussions of such an action. The room is tense, every heartbeat magnified. Kody glances at his wives, silently pleading for understanding, for forgiveness, but the faces he sees reflect shock, anger, betrayal, and disbelief. Robyn's tears stream freely. Christine's eyes blaze with intensity. Janelle shakes slightly, and Meri's composed expression is shadowed by deep calculation. The witness reveals the pièce de résistance, an emotionally manipulative, private conversation captured on recordings, with promises of silence now broken. The room listens, rapt, as voices echo through the courtroom. Robyn's voice, tearful and trembling, Christine's sharp retorts, and Kody's attempts to explain all collide in a tense, emotional cacophony that leaves the audience gripping the edge of their seats. When the recording finally concludes, the courtroom falls silent. The weight of truth hangs palpably in the air. Robyn sits in quiet anguish, her eyes cast downward. Christine's glare is fierce and unyielding. Janelle barely trembles, while Meri's eyes lock onto Kody, demanding an answer from him. Kody sharply exhales, the crushing pressure of being exposed and the reality of the emotional fallout he has caused overwhelming him. The judge finally speaks, voice deliberate and authoritative. It is clear that this family has endured secrecy, manipulation, and emotional distress. The consequences of these actions are profound, and the court will take all evidence into account. Each party must reflect on their role, for the truth has now been revealed. The wives continued exchanging tense glances, each digesting the revelations in her own way. Robyn quietly sobs. Christine's expression hardens. Janelle nervously twists her fingers, while Meri remains poised, her mind calculating the next steps. Kody had leaned forward, his face pale in realization that his family, which he struggled so hard to keep together, was now at a critical crossroads.